Greetings and salutations. I hope everyone had a lovely Valentine's Day. Or Singles Awareness Celebration. Hello, Angelica. Wolfgang got a Valentine's Day present, but I think he's lying on it. Can we show everybody? Good. You got a couple of little slices of catnip pizza with little hearts on them from Christina. So thank you, Christina. He obviously loves these. He's been playing with these and chasing them and chewing them. Just funny because they're just like little slices of pizza. Hello, Anna. Michelle Vanderpool is here. Hi, Dari. Svetlana. Speaking of gifts, the whiskey that you sent is still holding on somewhat. Blonde Avenger, hello Meg. How are you doing, Meg? Are you healing well? Claire Bear, hello. Patty Pinkstaff is here. Hi. See, I don't see my mom in here yet. Charity Swanson, hello. Yeah, Valentine's pizza. Hello, Melissa's dog Eclipse. It's cute. Oh, that's really cute. Okay, hear and see me. Oh, good. Before I even asked. Thank you. I was talking to Mom on the phone today, and they were having a huge winter storm there in the Midwest. So I hope it didn't knock out her internet. Well, yes, but still sore. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're progressing. I thought in honor of Valentine's Day, I'd start tonight with a poem. This is by Rita Dove, who was the United States Poet Laureate in 1993. Oh, good, Mom's here. Just when I was starting to worry. So this is Heart to Heart by Rita Dove. It's neither red nor sweet. It doesn't melt or turn over, break or harden, so it can't feel pain, yearning, regret. It doesn't have a tip to spin on. It isn't even shapely, just a thick clutch of muscle, lopsided, mute. Still, I feel it inside. I feel it inside its cage, sounding a dull tattoo. I want. But I can't open it. There's no key. I can't wear it on my sleeve or tell you from the bottom of it how I feel. Here. It's all yours now. But you'll have to take me too. Heart to Heart by Rita Dove. Oh, hello, Emily. Wasn't sure if you were going to be able to join us tonight. I'm getting off of work in time. Claire Bear, how's Tahoe? Is there a lot of snow still? So, this being February, it is, of course, Black History Month as well. And I'm going to read a little bit of Maya Angelou. This opening poem is called When You Come by Maya Angelou. When you come to me unbidden, beckoning me to long ago rooms where memories lie, offering me as to a child an attic, gatherings of days too few, baubles of stolen kisses, trinkets of borrowed loves, trunks of secret words, I cry. I'm going to do one more by Maya Angelou. This is less of a poem and more of a treatise. Yeah, Claire, it's not nearly as snowy up here in Big Bear as it would typically be in February either. Yet here we are. All right, this last piece by Maya Angelou, this is called In All Ways a Woman. In my young years, I took pride in the fact that luck was called a lady. In fact, there were so few public acknowledgments of the female presence that I felt personally honored whenever nature and large ships were referred to as feminine. But as I matured, I began to resent being considered a sister to a changeling as fickle as luck, as aloof as an ocean, and as frivolous as nature. The phrase, "a woman always has the right to change her mind," played so aptly into the negative image of the female that I made myself a victim to an unwavering decision. Even if I made an inane and stupid choice, I stuck by it rather than be like a woman and change my mind. Being a woman is hard work. Not without joy and even ecstasy, but still relentless, unending work. Becoming an old female may require only being born with certain genitalia, inheriting long-living genes, and the fortune not to be run over by an out-of-control truck, but to become and remain a woman, command the existence and employment of genius. The woman who survives intact and happy must be at once tender and tough. She must have convinced herself, or be in the unending process of convincing herself, that she, her values, and her choices are important. In a time and world where males hold sway and control, the pressure upon women to yield their rights of way is tremendous, and it is under those very circumstances that the woman's toughness must be in evidence. She must resist considering herself a lesser version of her male counterpart. She is not a sculptress, poetess, authoress, Jewess, negress, or even, now rare in university parlance, a rectoress. If she is the thing, then for her own sense of self and for the education of the ill-informed, she must insist with rectitude in being the thing and in being called the thing. A rose by any other name may smell as sweet, but a woman called by a devaluing name will only be weakened by the misnomer. She will need to prize her tenderness and be able to display it at appropriate times in order to prevent toughness from gaining total authority and to avoid becoming a mirror image of those men who value power above life and control over love. It is imperative that a woman keep her sense of humor intact and at the ready. She must see, even if only in secret, that she is the funniest, looniest woman in her world, which she should also see as being the most absurd world of all times. It has been said that laughter is therapeutic and amiability lengthens the lifespan. Women should be tough, tender, laugh as much as possible, and live long lives. The struggle for equality continues unabated, and the woman warrior who is armed with wit and courage will be among the first to celebrate victory. Good. A few more people have joined us, I see. Hello, Miss Nicole Pierce. Ruth Sanchez got to hear Maya live a year before she died. That is, I think I remember you telling me that once before, or perhaps saying it here. I got to hear her live in St. Louis a few years before she passed. She was speaking and reading at the huge historical Grand Fox Theater. It's just an amazing place to have been able to hear her. Okay, one more short thing before we launch into this evening's short story. This is just totally relevant to Valentine's Day, so I couldn't put this off to next week. This is a scene edited out of Romeo and Juliet. In this scene, Romeo and Juliet have met, and they now know both who the other one is. And if you're not familiar with the play, if you're not familiar with the backdrop, this is, of course, what West Side Story was borrowed from. These are two teenagers that are just desperately in love, but come from two opposing households, both alike in dignity and in greatness. But in Renaissance Italy, they might as well be warring street gangs. Their cousins are constantly fighting with each other, sometimes even killing each other. And in this particular scene, Romeo, if she wasn't attracted to him, it would be creepy. I'll put it that way. In this particular scene, Romeo has happened upon her balcony. He's not on the balcony, he's underneath the balcony, but he's walking around on her family's grounds. And that would be really, really, really bad, because if he were to be caught and recognized, they'd kill him. I mean, it's pretty unambiguous. If the Capulets saw a Montague on their property at night, they wouldn't be calling the police. There would be no investigation. They would just kill him and deal with the impact of that later. So it's a life or death big deal for him to be creeping around the Montague compound. But for him, it's one of those stupid teenage things that you just do anyway, regardless what a stupid idea it is. I don't believe at the beginning of this he actually knows like what room is hers, but he discovers that at the very opening of this scene. This is Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2, Capulet's Orchard. But soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. It's my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew I were here. Oh, she speaks. Yet she says nothing. What of that? I'm too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. She were the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there? They in her head, the brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night being o'er my head as a winged messenger when he bestrides the lazy, pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Romeo, oh Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. Shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this? 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's a Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man, albeit some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, so Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owns without that title. Romeo doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all of myself. I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. What man art thou, thus bescreened in night, so stumblest on my counsel? By a name, I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word. My ears have not drunk 100 words of that tongue's utterance, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and a Montague? Neither, fair saint, if either thee dislike. How canst thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art, if any of my kinsmen find thee here. With love's light wings did I o'erperch the walls. For stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do that dares love attempt. Therefore thy kinsmen are no let to me. If they do see thee here, they will murder thee. Alack, there lies more peril in thine eyes than in 20 of their swords. I would not for the world they saw thee here. I have night's cloak to hide me from their sight. And but thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than ended by wanting of thy love. By whose direction foundst thou this place? By love, that first did prompt me to inquire. He lent me counsel, and I lent him eyes. Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden blush bepaint my cheek, for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. Dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye, and I will take thy word, yet if thou swearest, thou may prove's false. O gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully, or if thou thinkest I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee nay. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my behavior light, but that thou overheardst ere I was ware, my true love passion. Therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love which the dark night hath so discovered. Lady, by yonder blessed moon, I swear that tips with silver all these fruit treetops. Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest thy love prove likewise variable. What shall I swear by? Do not swear at all. Or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee. If my heart's dear love, well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy of this contract tonight. It is too rash, it's too unadvised, too sudden. This bud of love by summer's ripening breath might prove a beauteous flower when next we meet. Good night, good night. As sweet repose and rest come to thy heart as that within my breast. Oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? What satisfaction canst thou have tonight? The exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. I gave thee mine before thou did request it, and yet I would it were to give again. Wouldst thou withdraw it? For what purpose, love? But to be frank, and give it thee again. And yet I wish but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea. My love is deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. I hear some noise within. Dear love, adieu. Sweet Montague, be true. Stay but a little. I will come again. Oh, blessed, blessed night, I am afeard. I am afeard being in night. All this is but a dream. Too flattering, sweet to be substantial. 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee. Where and what time that will perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. I come, anon, sweet nurse, anon. But if thou meanst not well, I do beseech thee to cease thy suit and leave me to my grief 1,000 times. Good night. 1,000 times the worse to want thy light. Love goes toward love as schoolboys from their books, but love from love toward school with heavy looks. Hist, Romeo, hist. Oh, for a falconer's voice to lure this flying hawk back again, for then I would tear the cave where Echo lies and make her airy tongue more hoarse than mine with repetition of my Romeo's name. Romeo. It is my soul that calls upon my name. How silver sweet sound lovers' tongues by night, like softest music to attending ears. Romeo, my dear, at what o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee? By the hour of 9. I will not fail. 'Tis 20 years till then. I forgot why I did call thee back. Let me stand here till thou do remember it. I shall forget to have thee stand still there, remembering how I love thy company. And I'll still stay, to have thee still forgetting any other home but this. 'Tis almost morning. I would have thee gone, and yet no farther than a wanton's bird that lets it hop a little from her hand like a poor prisoner in his twisted gyves with a silk thread plucks it back again, so loving jealous of his liberty. I would I were thy bird. Sweet, so would I. Yet I should kill thee with much cherishing. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow. Sleep dwell upon thine eyes, peace in thy breast. Would I were sleep and peace, so sweet to rest. Hence will I go to my ghostly father's cell to help crave and my dear hap to tell. Yeah. And if you don't know what happens then, well, it's not the song and dance number that happens in West Side Story. I'll give you that much. Thank you. Oh, this would be a great time. I forgot to ask everybody to reach down, click the things, like, share, save. And if there's anybody here, hello, Celia. If there's anybody here that hasn't subscribed to Hunter's Acoustic Cabin, this would be a good time. Also, of course, we've got the Venmo and PayPal info down there for virtual tickets. helps keep a steady flow of cat food, right? Yeah, buddy. I'm gonna need that hand though. I gotta turn pages. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. He's such a great companion. He really is. So tonight's story, more people are aware of the plot of this story. Hello, Malika. Hello. More people are aware of the plot of this particular story than have actually read this story. This was first published in August of 1959 in the Saturday Evening Post, of all places. I'm told there was a 1998 movie that was based on this. I've not seen that movie, but The author, Jack Finney, also, he did another time travel love story called Somewhere in Time, which was in 1980. I think that would have been like right after Christopher Reeve starred in Superman. He starred in Somewhere in Time with Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour, who the Jane Seymour that did not marry Henry VIII. Mom mentioned that she watched that movie at least 3 times when it came on television. I think I must have read this in high school when I read it for the first time. I can't pinpoint exactly when I did, but this is The Love Letter by Jack Finney. I've heard of secret drawers in old desks, of course. Who hasn't? But the day I bought my desk, I wasn't thinking of secret drawers, and I know very well I didn't have any least premonition or feel of mystery about it. I spotted it in the window of a secondhand store near my apartment. I went in to look it over, and the proprietor told me where he got it. It came from one of the last of the big old mid-Victorian houses in Brooklyn. They were tearing it down over on Brock Place, a few blocks away, and he'd bought the desk along with some other furniture, dishes, glassware, light fixtures, so on. But it didn't stir my imagination particularly. I never wondered or cared who might have used it long ago. I bought it and lugged it home because it was cheap and because it was small, a legless little wall desk that I fastened to my living room wall with heavy screws directly into the studding. I'm 24 years old, tall, thin, and I live in Brooklyn to save money and work in Manhattan to make it. When you're 24 and a bachelor, you usually figure you'll be married before much longer, and since they tell me that takes money, I'm reasonably ambitious, and I bring home work from the office every once in a while. And maybe every couple of weeks or so, I write a letter to my folks in Florida. So, I'd be needing a desk. There's no table. There's no table in my phone booth kitchenette. And I'd been trying to work at a wobbly little end table that I couldn't get my knees under. So, I bought the desk one Saturday afternoon and spent an hour or more fastening it to the wall. It was after 6 when I finished, and I had a date that night, so I had time to stand and admire it only for a minute or so. It was made of heavy wood with a slant top like a kid's school desk, and with the same sort of space underneath to put things into. But the back of it rose a good 2 feet above the desktop and was full of pigeonholes, like an old-style roll-top desk. Underneath the pigeonholes was a row of 3 brass-knobbed little drawers. It was all pretty ornate. The drawer ends carved, some fancy scroll work extending up and over the back and out from the sides to help it brace against the wall. I dragged a chair up, sat down at the desk to try it for height, then got showered, shaved, and dressed, and went over to Manhattan to pick up my date. Now, I'm trying to be honest about what happened, and I'm convinced that includes the way I felt when I got home around 2 or 2:30 that morning. I'm certain that what happened wouldn't have happened at all if I'd felt any other way. I'd had a good enough time that evening. We'd gone to an early movie that wasn't too bad, then had dinner, a drink or so, and some dancing afterwards. And the girl, Roberta Haig, she's pretty nice, bright, pleasant, good-looking. But walking home from the subway, the Brooklyn streets are quiet and deserted, and it occurred to me that while I'd probably see her again, I didn't really care whether I did or not. And I wondered, as I often had lately, whether there was something wrong with me. Whether I'd ever meet a girl I desperately wanted to be with. The only way a man can get married, it seems to me. So, when I stepped into my apartment, I knew I wasn't going to feel like sleep for a while. I was restless, half irritated for no good reason. And I took off my coat and yanked down my tie, wondering whether or not I wanted a drink or some coffee. Then I'd half forgotten about it. I saw the desk I'd bought that afternoon, and I walked over and sat down at it, thoroughly examining it for the first time. I lifted the top and stared down into the empty space underneath it. Lowering the top, I reached into one of the pigeonholes, and my hand and shirt cuff came out streaked with old dust. The holes were a good foot deep. I pulled open one of the little brass knobbed drawers, and there was a shred of paper in one of its corners. Nothing else. I pulled the drawer all the way out and studied its construction, turning it in my hands. It was a solidly made, beautifully mortised little thing. Then I pushed my hand into the drawer opening. It went in to about the middle of my hand before my fingertips touched the back, and there was nothing in there. For a few minutes, I just sat at the desk thinking vaguely that I could write a letter to my folks, and then it suddenly occurred to me that the little drawer in my hand was only half a foot long, while the pigeonholes just above the drawer extended a good foot back. Oh. Shoving my hand into the opening again, exploring with my fingertips, I found a tiny grooved indentation and pulled out the secret drawer, which lay in the back of the first. For an instant, I was excited at the glimpse of papers inside it. Then I felt a stab of disappointment as I saw what they were. There was a little sheaf of folded writing paper, plain white, but yellowed with age at the edges, and the sheets were all blank. There were 3 or 4 blank envelopes to match, and underneath them, a small, round glass bottle of ink. And because it had been upside down, the cork remained moist and tight in the bottle mouth. A good third of the ink had remained unevaporated still. Beside the bottle lay a plain black wooden pen holder. The pen point was reddish black with old ink. There was nothing else in the drawer. And then, putting the things back into the drawer, I felt the slight extra thickness of one blank envelope, saw that it was sealed, and I ripped it open to find the letter inside. The folded paper opened stiffly, the crease permanent with age, and even before I saw the date, I knew this letter was old. The handwriting was obviously feminine and beautifully clear. The letters perfectly formed and very ornate. The capitals especially being a whirl of dainty curlicues. The ink was rust black. The date at the top of the page was May 14th, 1882. And reading it, I saw that it was a love letter. It began, "Dearest, Mama, Papa, Willie, and Cook are long retired and to sleep. Now the night far advanced, the house silent, I alone remain awake, at last free to speak to you as I choose. Yes, I am willing to say it. Heart of mine, I crave your bold glance. I long for the tender warmth of your look. I welcome your ardency and prize it. For what else should these be taken but sweet tribute to me?" I smiled a little. It was hard to believe that people had once expressed themselves in elaborate phrasings of this kind, but they had. The letter continued, and I wondered why it had never been sent. "Dear one, do not ever change your ways. Never address me other than with what consideration my utterances should deserve. If I be foolish and whimsical, deride me sweetly if you will. But if I speak with seriousness, respond always with what care you deem my thoughts worthy. For, oh my beloved, I am sick to death of the indulgent smile and tolerant glance with which a woman's fancies are met, as I am repelled by the false gentleness and nicety of manner which too often ill conceal the wantonness they attempt to mask. I speak of the man I am to marry. If you could but save me from that. But you cannot. You are everything I prize, warmly and honestly ardent, respectful in heart as well as in manner, true and loving. You are as I wish you to be, for you exist only in my mind. But, figment though you are, and though I shall never see your like, you are more dear to me than he to whom I am betrothed. I think of you constantly. I dream of you. I speak with you in my mind and heart. Would that you existed outside of them. Sweetheart, good night. Dream of me too. With all my love, I am your Helen. At the bottom of the page, as I'm sure she'd been taught in school, was written, Miss Helen Elizabeth Worley, Brooklyn, New York. And as I stared down at it now, I was no longer smiling at this cry from the heart in the middle of a long ago night. The night is a strange time when you're alone in it. The rest of your world asleep. If I'd found that letter in the daytime, I'd have smiled and shown it to a few friends, then forgotten it. But alone, here, now, a window partly open, a cool, late-at-night freshness stirring the quiet air, it was impossible to think of the girl who had written this letter as a very old lady, or maybe long since dead. As I read her words, she seemed real and alive to me, sitting, or so I pictured her, pen in hand at this desk, in a long, white, old-fashioned dress, her young hair piled on top of her head in the dead of a night like this, here in Brooklyn, almost in sight of where I now sat. And my heart went out to her as I stared down at her secret, hopeless appeal against the world and time that she lived in. I'm trying to explain why I answered that letter. There in the silence of a timeless spring night, it seemed natural enough to uncork that old bottle, pick up the pen beside it, and then, spreading a sheet of yellowing old notebook paper on the desktop, to begin to write. I felt that I was communicating with a still living young woman when I wrote, "Helen, I have just read the letter in the secret drawer of your desk, and I wish I knew how I could possibly help you. I can't tell what you might think of me if there were a way I could reach you, but you are someone I am certain I would like to know. I hope you are beautiful, but you needn't be. You're a girl I could like, and maybe ardently. And if I did, I promise you I'd be true and loving. Do the best you can, Helen Elizabeth Worley, in the time and place you are. I can't reach you or help you, but I will think of you, and maybe I'll dream of you too. Yours, Jake Belknap." I was grinning a little sheepishly as I signed my name, knowing I'd read through what I had written, then crumple out the old sheet and throw it away, but I was glad I had written it. And you know, I didn't throw it away. Still caught in the feeling of the warm, silent night, it suddenly seemed to me that throwing my letter away would turn the writing of it into a meaningless and foolish thing. Maybe what I did seems more foolish still. I folded the paper, put it into one of the envelopes, and sealed it. Then I dipped the pen into the old ink and wrote, "Miss Helen Worley," on the face of the envelope. I suppose this can't be explained. You'd have to have been where I was and felt it as I did to understand it, but I wanted to mail that letter. I simply quit examining my feelings and quit trying to be rational. I was suddenly determined to complete what I'd begun, just as far as I was able to go. My parents sold their own home, their old home in New Jersey, when my father retired. And when my mother cleaned out the old house I grew up in, she packed up and mailed me a huge package of useless things I was frankly glad to have. There were class photographs dating from grammar school through college, old books I'd read as a kid, Boy Scout pins, a mass of junk of that sort, including a stamp collection I'd had in grade school. Now, I found these things on my hall closet shelf in the box they'd come in. And I found my old stamp album. It's funny how these things can stick in your mind over the years. Standing at the open closet door, I turned the pages of that beat-up old album directly to the stamps I remembered buying from another kid with 75 cents I'd earned cutting grass. There they lay, lightly fastened to the page with a little gummed paper hinge, a pair of 2 mint condition 2-cent United States stamps issued in 1869. And for all I knew, they might have been worth a fair amount of money by now, especially an unseparated pair of 2 stamps. But back at the desk, I pulled one of them loose, tearing carefully through the perforation. I licked the back and fastened it to the faintly yellowing old envelope. I thought no further than that. By now, I suppose I was in almost a kind of trance. I shoved the old ink bottle and pen into a hip pocket, picked up my letter, and walked out of my apartment. Brock Place, 3 blocks away, was deserted when I reached it. The high, late moonlight softening the lines of the big concrete block supermarket at the corner. Then, as I walked on, my letter in my hand, there stood the old house. It stood far back from the broken cast iron fence in the center of its wide, weed-grown lot, black etched in the moonlight, and I stopped on the walk and stood staring up at it. The high windowed old roof was gone, the interior nearly gutted. The windows and doors were all removed, the openings hollow in the clear wash of night. But the high old walls, last of all to go, still stood, tall, dignified in their old-fashioned strength and outmoded charm. Then I walked through the opening where a gate had once hung, up the cracked and weed-grown brick pavement toward the wide old porch, and there, on one of the ornate fluted posts, I saw the house number, deeply and elaborately carved into the old wood. At the wide, flat porch rail leading down to the walk, I brought out my ink and pen and copied the number carefully onto my envelope. 972, I printed under the name of the girl who had once lived here. Brock Place, Brooklyn, New York. Then I turned toward the street again, my envelope in my hand. There was a mailbox at the next corner, and I stopped beside it, but to drop this letter into that box, knowing in advance that it could only go to the dead letter office, would again, I couldn't help feeling, turn the writing of it into an empty, meaningless act. And after a moment, I walked on past the box, crossed the street, turned right, suddenly knowing exactly where I was going. I walked 4 blocks through the night, and I turned left at the next corner, walked half a block more, then turned up onto the worn stone steps of the Worcester Postal Substation. It must easily be one of the oldest postal substations in all of the borough, built much later than the decade following the Civil War. And I can't imagine that the inside has changed much at all. The floor is marble, the ceiling high, the woodwork dark and carved. The outer lobby is open at all times. And as I pushed through the old swinging doors, I saw that somewhere behind the opaque blind windows, a light burned dimly far in the rear of the post office, and I had an impression of subdued activity. But the lobby itself was dim and silent, and as I walked across the worn stone floor, I knew I was seeing all around me precisely what Brooklynites had seen for many generations long dead. I pushed the worn brass plate open, dropped my letter into the silent blackness of the slot, and it disappeared forever, with no sound. Then I turned and left to walk home with a feeling of fulfillment, of having done at least everything I possibly could in response to the silent cry for help I'd found in the secrecy of the old desk. Next morning, I felt the way almost anyone might. Standing at the bathroom mirror, shaving, remembering what I had done the night before, I grinned, feeling foolish, but at the same time, secretly pleased with myself. I was glad I had written and solemnly mailed that letter, and now I realized why I put no return address on the envelope. I didn't want it to come forlornly back to me with "no such person," or whatever the phrase is, stamped on the envelope. There'd once been such a girl, and last night she still existed for me. And I didn't want to see my letter to her rubber stamped, scribbled on, and unopened to prove that she no longer was. I was terrifically busy all the next week. I work for a wholesale grocery concern, and we got a big new account for a chain of supermarkets, and that meant extra work for everyone. More often than not, I had lunch at my desk in the office and worked several evenings besides. I had dates the 2 evenings I was free. On Friday afternoon, I was at the main public library in Manhattan at 5th Avenue and 42nd, copying statistics from half a dozen trade publications for a memorandum I'd been assigned to write over the weekend on the new account. Late in the afternoon, the man sitting beside me at the big reading room table closed his book, stowed away his glasses, picked up his hat from the table, and left. I sat back in my chair, glancing at my watch. Then I looked over at the book he'd left on the table. It was a big, 1-volume pictorial history of New York, put out by Columbia University. And I dragged it over and began leafing through it. I skimmed over the first sections pretty quickly, but when the old sketches and drawings began giving way to actual photographs, I turned the pages more slowly. I leafed past the first photos taken around the mid-century, and then past those of the Civil War period. But when I reached the first photograph of the 1870s, it was a view of Fifth Avenue in 1871. I began reading the captions under each one. Now, I knew it would be too much to hope to find a photograph of Brock Place in Helen Worley's time especially, and of course, I didn't. But I knew there'd surely be photographs taken in Brooklyn during the 1880s. And a few pages farther on, I found what I hoped I might. In clear, sharp detail and beautifully reproduced lay a big half-page photograph from a street less than a quarter mile from Brock Place. And staring down at it, there, in the library, I knew that Helen Worley must often have walked along this very sidewalk. Varney Street, 1881, the caption said. A typical Brooklyn residential street of the period. Varney Street today, I walked 2 blocks of it every night coming home from work. It's a wasteland. I pass used car lots, a shabby concrete garage, the front of it littered with rusting car parts and old tires, and half a dozen or so nearly paintless boarding houses. It's a nondescript street, and it's impossible to believe that there has ever been a tree on its entire length. But there has been. There, in sharp black and white, in the book on the table before me, lay Varney Street, 1881. There were the wide grass-covered parkways between the cut stone curb and sidewalks. The thick old trees rose high on both sides of the street and met overhead to intertwine and roof the wide street with green. The photograph had been taken from the street. It had been possible to do that then, in a day of occasional slow trotting horses and buggies. It was very doable. The old walk, there in the foreground under the great trees, appeared to be at least 6 feet wide, spacious enough for a family to walk easily down it, 4 or 5 abreast as families did in those times, walk together down the sidewalks under the trees. And beyond the walk, widely separated and set far back across the fine old lawns, rose the great houses, the 10, 12, and 14-room family houses, 2 or more stories high, with attics above them for children to play in and discover the relics of childhood that came before him. Their windows were tall, and they were framed on the outside with ornamented wood. And the solid construction of every one of those lost houses in that ancient photograph, there had been the time, skill, money, and inclination to decorate their eaves with scroll work, to finish a job with craftsmanship and pride, and time, too, to build huge, wide porches on which families sat on summer evenings with palm leaf fans. Far down that lovely tree-sheltered street, out of focus and indistinct, walked the retreating figure of a long-skirted, puff-sleeved woman, her summer parasol open at her back. Of the thousands of long-dead girls it might have been, I knew this could not be Helen Worley. Yet, it wasn't completely impossible either, I told myself. This was a street, precisely as I saw it now, down which she must often have walked, and I let myself think that yes, this was she. Maybe I live in what is for me the wrong time, and I was filled now with the most desperate yearning to be there on that peaceful street, to walk off past the edges of the scene on the printed page before me into the old and beautiful Brooklyn of long ago, and to draw near and overtake that bobbing parasol in the distance, and then turn and look into the face of the girl who held it. I worked that evening at home, sitting at my desk. But once more now, Helen Elizabeth Worley was in my mind. I worked steadily all evening, and it was around 12:30 when I finished. 11 handwritten pages, which I'd get typed at the office on Monday. Then I opened the little center desk drawer, into which I'd put a supply of rubber bands and paper clips, took out a clip and fastened the pages together and sat back in my chair. The little center desk drawer stood half open as I'd left it, and then, as my eye fell on it, I suddenly realized that, of course, it, too, must have another secret drawer behind it. I hadn't thought of that. It simply hadn't occurred to me the week before. In my interest and excitement over the letter I'd found behind the first drawer of the row, and I'd been too busy all the week to think of it since, but now I pulled the center drawer all the way out, reached behind it and found the little groove in the smooth wood that I had touched. Then I brought out the second secret little drawer. I'll tell you what I think. Though I don't claim to be speaking scientifically, the night is a strange time. Things are different at night, as every human being knows somewhere deep inside him. And I think this, here and there, still are little islands, isolated remnants of the way things once were. And the Worcester Postal Substation is one of them. It has not changed really, not at all. And I think about that at night, late at night, the world asleep, when the sounds of things as they are now are nearly silent, and the sight of things as they are now is vague in the darkness. The boundary between then and now wavers. At certain moments, it places, and then it fades. There in the dimness of the old Worcester post office in the dead of night, lifting my letter to Helen Worley toward the old brass door of the letter drop, I think that I stood on one side of that slot in the year 1959, and that I dropped my letter, properly stamped, written and addressed in the ink and on the very paper of Helen Worley's youth, into the Brooklyn of 1882 on the other side of that worn old slot. I believe that. And I'm not even interested in proving it, but I believe it. Because now, from that second secret little drawer, I brought out the paper I found in it, opened it, and in rust black ink on yellowing old paper, I read, "Please, oh please, who are you? Where can I reach you? Your letter arrived today in the second morning post. And I have wandered the house and garden ever since in an agony of excitement. I cannot conceive how you saw my letter in its secret place, but since you did, perhaps you will see this one too. Oh, tell me your letter is no hoax or cruel joke. Willie, if it is you, if you have discovered my letter and think to deceive your sister with a prank, I pray you to tell me. But if it is not, if I now address someone who has truly responded to my most secret hopes, do not longer keep me ignorant of who and where you are, for I, too, and I confess it willingly, long to see you. And I, too, feel, and am most certain of it, that if I could know you, I would love you. It is impossible for me to think otherwise. I must hear from you again. I shall not rest until I do. I remain most sincerely, Helen Elizabeth Worley." After a long time, I opened the first little drawer of the old desk and took out the pen and ink I'd found there and a sheet of the notepaper. For minutes then, pen in my hand, I sat there in the night, staring down at the empty paper on the desktop. Finally then, I dipped the pen into the old ink and wrote, "Helen, my dear, I don't know how to say this so it will even seem comprehensible to you, but I do exist here in Brooklyn, less than 3 blocks from where you now read this, but in the year 1959. We are separated not by space, but by the years which lie between us. Now I own the desk which you once had, and at which you wrote the note that I found in it. Helen, all I can tell you is that I answered that note, mailed it late at night at the old Worcester station, and that somehow it reached you, as I hope this will too. This is no hoax. Can you imagine anyone playing a joke that cruel? I live in Brooklyn, within sight of your house. That you cannot. I live in a Brooklyn within sight of your house that you cannot imagine. It is a city whose streets are now crowded with wheeled vehicles propelled by engines, and it is a city extending far beyond the limits you know, with a population of millions, so crowded there is hardly room any longer for trees. From my window, as I write, I can see across Brooklyn Bridge, which has hardly changed from the way you two see it now. I see Manhattan Island, and rising from it are the lighted silhouettes of stone and steel buildings more than 1,000 feet high. You must believe me. I exist 77 years after you read this, and with the feeling that I have fallen in love with you. I sat for some moments staring at the wall, trying to figure out how to explain something I was certain was true. Then I wrote, Helen, there are 3 secret drawers in our desk. Into the first, you put only the letter I found. You cannot now add something to that drawer and hope it will reach me, for I have already opened that drawer and found only the letter that you put there. Nothing else can now come down through the years to me in that drawer, for you cannot now alter what you have already done. Into the second drawer, in 1882, you put the note which lies before me, which I found when I opened that drawer a few minutes ago. You put nothing else into it, and now that, too, cannot be changed. But I haven't opened the third drawer, Helen. Not yet. It is the last way you can still reach me. And for the last time, I will mail this as I did before, then wait. In a week, I will open the last drawer. Yours, Jake Belknap. It was a long week. I worked, I kept busy daytimes, but at night I thought of hardly anything but the third secret drawer in my desk. I was terribly tempted to open it earlier, telling myself that whatever might lie in it had been there decades before and must be there now, but I wasn't sure, and I waited. Then, late at night, a week to the hour after I'd mailed my second letter at the old Worcester post office, I pulled out the third drawer. I reached in and brought out the last little secret drawer which lay behind it. My hand was actually shaking, and for a moment I couldn't bear to look directly. Something lay in the drawer. I turned my head away. Then I looked. I'd expected a long letter, very long, of many pages, her last communication with me, and full of everything she wanted to say, but there was no letter at all. It was a photograph, about 3 inches square, a faded sepia in color, mounted on heavy, stiff cardboard, and with the photographer's name in tiny gold script down in the corner, Brunner and Holland, Parisian Photography, Brooklyn, New York. The photograph showed the head and shoulders of a girl in a high-necked dark dress with a cameo brooch at the collar. Her dark hair was swept tightly back, covering the ears in a style which no longer suits our ideas of beauty. But the stark severity of that dress and hairstyle couldn't spoil the beauty of the face that smiled out at me from that old photograph. It wasn't beautiful in any classic sense, I suppose. The brows were unplucked and somewhat heavier than what we were used to, but it was the soft, warm smile of her lips and her eyes large and serene as she looks out at me over the years. Those are the things that make Helen Elizabeth Worley a beautiful woman. Across the bottom of her photograph, she had written, "I will never forget." And as I sat there at the old desk, staring at what she had written, I understood that, of course, that was all there was to say. What else? On this, the last time, as she knew that she'd never be able to reach me again. It wasn't the last time, though. There was one final way for Helen Worley to communicate with me over the years. And it took me a long time, as it must have taken her to realize it. Only a week ago, on my 4th day of searching, I finally found it. It was late in the evening, and the sun was almost gone when I found the old headstone among all the others, stretching off in rows into the quiet trees. And then I read the inscription etched in the weathered old tombstone. Helen Elizabeth Worley, 1861 to 1934. Under this were the words, "I never forgot." And neither will I. Well, this concludes Fireside Tales with Wolfgang, episode 20. I'm going to have to go through and read all the comments, of course. Would not be surprised if someone had pointed out the seeming parallels between that and The Time Traveler's Wife. I'm told that was made into a very good movie that I've never seen, but it's an incredible book. I wouldn't recommend reading it unless you feel very, very good about yourself in life. It is depressing as hell. I mean, it's like almost as severe as The Notebook in its emotional impact, but without any further commentary, this is where I will leave the camera running for a few minutes so that everyone can say goodnight to everyone else. And of course, keep an eye out on Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. for the next music video on Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. And I will see you on Thursday night for the next Lovecast. Thank you.